we're continuing on white magic, and we're getting to the last phrase on Rule 11. And it was mentioned to me it would be helpful if I would keep track of or mention the page numbers that we're at. And we're starting on page 481 is where we left off. Okay, the phrase we're on is the magician must utter the mystic phrase which will save him from the work of the thought form, so to speak. So he says he's going to divide this into two categories. The first category is salvation from the power exerted by the thought form we have ourselves created. So in the process of creating thought forms can actually, they can be both positive and negative, and every thought form has positive and negative potential. So as a thought, after the thought form is created, in the process of creation and after it's created, it can have positive and negative effects, and we want the magician, the creator, must save himself from the negative aspects of the thought form. And the second, he says, is salvation from the power of the threefold body which the soul has built through the magical release called death. Okay, so thought forms have created power in our threefold body. What's the threefold body?
Physical, emotional, mental.
Okay, so so how do we need to be saved from the physical, emotional, and mental? Let's start with the physical. What do we need to be saved from? We need to be saved from our own body?
Maybe.
In other words, our own body has impulses and desires, appetites about it that can completely consume us and take us totally away from spirit, and we need to be saved from that. The same thing with the desire nature, our emotions. If we just go with the flow with our emotions, it pulls us away from spirit. So that we need to be saved from that pull that is associated with our astral body. And if we aren't, we can suffer dire consequences. And the same thing with the mental body. With the mind can create illusions that can trap us. So like people get trapped in false religion, false political ideas, false even false business ideas and scams, to the point that it does them a lot of damage. And we have to be saved from these illusions, and we're saved from them by when we learn to see through them, to see them as they are. When we can see them as they are, then we are saved. And that was a basic message behind Jesus saving souls. When he saved a soul, so to speak, what he did was he brought enlightenment to them so that they could see the real from the unreal. And when people saw what was real and unreal, then it gave them power, the power of actual salvation. And the actual power of salvation, when they saw the real, then they could take steps towards spirit and away from the material pull that pulls away from spirit. Okay, so the next section is on the salvation from our thought forms. He speaks to the thinkers of the world who have gained power to produce thought forms that manifest their desires. So he's concentrating on the thinkers. Now, these aren't necessarily spiritual gurus or whatever, but there's thinkers in all forms of activity: the political, science, educational, religion. And there's certain people that are thinkers that are guiding the thought forms of their various groups. What are the different characteristics of those on the right and left hand paths is a question that he kind of brings up. And we have the various thinkers, and the thinkers are on one set of thinkers are pointing us one direction and another direction. So what are the characteristics of those thinkers out there that are pointing us in the right direction compared to the wrong direction? What differentiates them?
It says those who think selflessly and are beneficial to life.
Okay, good point. One thing he points out is the most important determining thing of the thinkers that we look for is their intent. What is the intent of that person? So let's say we have a preacher and we're in a religion, and this preacher sounds really good, but he's flying around in a private jet, has a big mansion, and seems to be spending a lot of the money on himself. What does that tell us about his intent?
Pretty selfish.
Right. Now, on the other hand, let's take another preacher, Billy Graham. He took just a very modest salary, lived in a modest house, and didn't seem to require much for himself. So at least, what does this tell us about his intent?
That it's away from himself and geared more towards the service of others.
Right. Even though we may not agree with him 100%, at least he lived the type of life that showed that his intent was to try to do good. And there's a lot of people.
Hypocritical.
Yeah, that doesn't mean he's right and everything, but he at least tried to do good in his life. And so he was probably one of the ones that the Benton talks about that was fairly highly evolved, that was trying to do good in his particular line of thought. Jimmy Baker, on the other hand, some of these other guys, their intent was kind of manifest in how they lived their lives. But same thing with other things. Let's say a politician. How do we determine the politician's intent? Is it the same way? Can we look at if he has a lavish lifestyle at the people's expense? Now, if he earns his own money, it's one thing. But if he seems to be earning it through pressure groups and people paying him money under the table, then we pretty much, or he mysteriously seems to have accumulated millions and millions of dollars with no effort, then you get a little suspicious of the guy. Why is he really a politician? Is he a politician to serve or just to amass power? Okay, that's one thing we can look for. What else can we look for in a politician?
His track record. See what he's done.
Yeah, see what he's done. Is he voting just to please everybody, or is he voting to really help and serve humanity? Is everything he's doing just attacking the other party, or is he trying to get something done to help the people? And okay, so we have these people on the left and right in all the areas. Yeah.
There is no politician like that.
Yeah, they're hard to find. It's hard to find a good one.
Yeah, if there is one, maybe somewhere. Let me find it because I don't see it.
You vote for a new guy. The new guy says all the right things. Then when he gets in, the bosses tell him how to think and what to do, and then it's like he's lost after that. And it's kind of sad. So yeah, I've written a treatise on, or a whole book on how to reform the political system, but it hasn't really got much circulation. So, but I think it is possible to reform. I think it needs to be reformed so that the people have more influence over the politicians. They get in there and they just ignore what the people want and do what keeps them in power. That's their main concern. So we have this intent is a really important thing to look for to determine who's on the left and who's on the right. Another really important one is, are they honest? Basically honest. Now, making a mistake, sometimes if politician or somebody makes a mistake, people come out of the woodwork, call them liars, and maybe it was an honest mistake. An honest mistake is different from a lie or a distortion. But one of the things to look for is will the person take something about another person or something he wants to promote and distort it to his advantage. So the distortion is far from reality. When we see this, we know the person is not totally on the right-hand path. And we see this in politics a lot. The left distorts the right distorts the left. Some people a lot more than others. And it's kind of, we're in a time of distortion like I've never seen before. You even read the newspaper, there's tremendous distortion in the news as it's related. And this is all the work of the left-hand path, is to distort so that they can create the image among the public, the rank and file that they want people to have. Okay, we could go on about that for quite a while, the differences between the left and right, and we've done it before, but it's important that we discern the differences, the left and the right-hand path. And the Tibetan points out an important thing is he talks about the rank and file, the average people are controlled largely by the left-hand path until they reach a certain degree of consciousness. It takes a certain degree of consciousness to see the difference between the two paths. Because until a person reaches that degree of consciousness, he can be easily deceived into thinking good is bad and bad is good. And Isaiah talked about this several times, and the scriptures do, that none can see how to do good, he said, in his day. He was complaining about that. He says they take good for evil and evil for good, light for darkness and darkness for light. And this persists to this day. People still look at things that are good and they call it evil, and look at things that are evil and call it good. And this happened when Hitler rose to power. Hitler was Times Man of the Year, and got lots of praise from a lot of people in America saying we need to be more like Hitler and do more of the stuff he's doing, until the war started, and then he became public enemy #1. Then it was revealed what kind of character he was. And so it's easy to call good evil and evil good. And it's interesting that how that which is in the past was called evil is now good, and vice versa. Slavery was called good for thousands of years. For thousands of years, people thought that slavery was an essential thing to be able to create civilization. And few people had to suffer, yeah, but that was suffering was for the greater good. And that was people's attitude about slavery. And they called evil good for thousands of years. Everybody did except for the slaves, pretty much. Okay. He says selfishness, ruthlessness, hatred, and cruelty characterizes the worker of mental substance, whose motive are for many lives centered around his own aggrandizement, focused on personal acquisition of possessions, and directed entirely to the attainment of his own pleasure and satisfaction, no matter what the cost to others. And such men are happily few, but we need to guard against this direction. That sounds a pretty good description of Epstein, that's just been in the news. He was pretty much dedicated to his own pleasure and his own things that he wanted, and brought him to a bad end, probably to a bad end by his own kind. Oh, remember last week, I think Maria asked me about him, and I said, there's going to be no video show up, even though there's supposed to be one. I said, there's not going to be any video. And that's exactly what happened. There's no video. We don't know what's going on. There's no evidence to show what happened. And the evidence is that he was probably killed by somebody. My opinion is probably the two guards were paid to kill him, because the two guards, they said they were asleep while he killed himself. And if they got paid off well, they won't mind getting fired, because they'll probably live high the rest of their lives if they were actually paid to do it. It's possible other people were, but
I've heard information about the coroner that his neck was broken.
Right, his neck was broken in such a way, a bone in his neck was broken that 95% of the cases, one has to be physically strangled by somebody else to break that bone. You don't break it by hanging yourself. And so that gives a lot of evidence that he was actually killed. But too bad. He's got a lot of dirt on a lot of people, and there's conspiracy theories going on all over the place. People don't know who is. People are blaming the left, the right, pointing fingers every which direction. He says a gradual and steady growth in group consciousness and responsibility, submergence of the wishes of the personal self, the manifestation of a loving spirit, characterize those who are oriented towards the life side of the divine whole. It might be said that human beings fall into three main groups. One, the vast majority who are neither good nor bad, but simply the unthinking. And we see a lot of those around us, the unthinking, that they go by they go by the first news they hear. They turn into the news that their bias leans them toward, and they don't question what comes out. They don't say, well, that sounds kind of odd, let me check that out. They just soak it in, whatever it is. Two, a small but powerful number devoted to selfishness and materialism. Okay, that would be the Epstein type people that are centered on personal satisfaction, even if it hurts other people. And three, a goodly number who are the pioneers into the kingdom of the soul, who are exponents of New Age ideas. So basically, people are divided in these three categories, and let us hope that all of us here are in the third category. We're exponents of new ideas, New Age ideas, and that take us into the soul, into the spirit. And there aren't very many of them, but we have the powers of evolution of the spirit on our side. So eventually we will be the ones to succeed and mold the events of the new age, because all the forces of spiritual evolution are with us.
There are 14 of us here today.
Yeah, it's a good start. Like I said, quite often the whole Renaissance, they say, was created by 80 people. So there's always just a small number of people that make the big differences on this planet. So if you don't think you count for anything, well, think again. Your ideas and thoughts count for a lot. And even just putting your thoughts in the air in a positive way, he points this out, that even that has an influence. Even just thinking the right direction adds to the stream of thoughts that everybody picks up. So it's important that we not only act right, but think right.
Francis Bacon said there's nothing more wrong in the state than when the cunning are taken for wise.
Yeah. So if number three are probably more numerous, because he says there's only a small number really devoted to selfishness. And the number devoted to, at least by theory, and to promoting spiritual things, are at least as great or more. Why do the selfish people have so much power? They seem to have more power than we do. Why is that?
That's what they're interested in, and what you're interested in, you attract.
Yeah, but we're interested in the spirit, so we should have more power than them. Why don't we?
We have the power of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Well,
Why do they get so many results?
We're pioneering into new territory, for one thing. We're creating a new thought form. People that are delving into evil or delving into what's been there for a long period of time, they're just reaping the rewards of an old harvest.
Yeah, and we look at it this way: we have the flow of matter, the forces of matter, and the flow of spirit. And right now, we are immersed in matter to the extent that the flow of matter is much stronger. And so, even though the really selfish people are not very many, they are like in a river that's flowing downstream, and they're going downstream. We're in a river going downstream, and we're trying to swim upstream. So we have a lot harder. We have to make a lot more effort to move us and the good people upstream. But then eventually, the flow of the stream will come to a peaceful standstill, and then it will switch directions. And when it switches directions, then the power of the Spirit will manifest, and we will be the ones that will have the tremendous power of influencing the rank and file of the masses. Because the rank and file of the masses, they're influenced by the greatest flow that they pick up. And right now it's on the material selfish side. Like that's why the politicians promising free stuff have so much power, because it's free, I don't have to work for it, that's the easy way, so the the more things you can give people that doesn't require any effort, the more power that you have, or the more things you can offer to them that appeals to their own desires on the materialistic level, the more power you have.
Well, we are the fifth subrace, or the fifth root race, and we are, in fact, on the upward swing. We're past the midway point, and so even though we don't notice it, evolution is proceeding apace as it should be.
Right, you're right there, but when that swing is made, it's like when we switch from one age to another. We're pretty much in the Aquarian age, but still that Piscean energy has tremendous residual power. And so we have the tremendous residual power of the material side will still be with us for a while. If we get solidly into the Aquarian age, that will be neutralized to a great degree. And decay indicates like the next 100 or 200 years is going to make a big difference. So it won't be too long before we will be able to take advantage of the more spiritual, the power of the spiritual flow. Okay, and aspirin, he says, evokes hatred in an associate if he arouses him to temper, and if he meets with dislike and antagonism. And it's because he himself is not entirely harmless. There are still in him seeds of trouble, for it is the law of nature that we get what we give and produce reactions in line with our activity, be it physical, emotional, or mental. Now the question is this always true? When an aspirant, oftentimes when an aspirant speaks and he tries to correct people, he's met with hatred. But like, look at Jesus. He was met with tremendous hatred, yet he was a very evolved person. So what's the truth of this? Is it always true that we're at fault if we invoke hatred on other people?
No. Well, perfection, like the Tibetan says, often brings imperfection to the surface. And he being a perfect representative as the Son of God and the Son of Man combined, he aroused the imperfections and the dark side of those people that opposed him. So just by the virtue of who he was, the light brought dark to the surface. But an aspirant who's not doing that can have the same effect, but have a different motive or a different intention.
Right. He points out that both the aspirants and the initiates will invoke hatred in other people when they go out and teach. But with the aspirant, he says a lot of it is his own fault.
Right.
Because he presents it wrong, he says the wrong stuff, he has the wrong motives. But an initiate with pure motive, he goes out and the hatred that manifests against him is the fault of the people manifesting it. Like Jesus did everything right in the way he presented. Then some of the apostles go out and wait. As a matter of fact, he told the apostles, he says, when you go out and teach, be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And so he told them to try to be as harmless as they could, because he knew that they weren't as evolved as he was, and that if they weren't careful, they would evoke a lot of unnecessary hatred. And for instance, a lot of aspirants will come out and say something like, boy, you're really screwed up there. You're just going to hell in a handbasket or whatever. And they say it in such a way that it would annoy anybody, you know. And they may see a higher light, but they present it in such a way that it antagonizes people. So what the rank and file seekers of light need to learn is to present the truth they have in as harmless way as possible. And then once they reach a certain level, they continue to be harmless, but they will realize that no matter how harmless they try to be, the truth itself is going to antagonize. So Jesus tried to be as harmless as possible, except maybe when he threw those people out of the temple. That kind of antagonized a lot of people. Matter of fact, some people even think, even though Jesus is called perfect, some people, some teachers think that Jesus actually made a mistake in the way he approached that. But yeah, if you look at it logically, well, you could really ask, was that a mistake or not? It certainly made everybody think in the temple when he chased them out with a whip and overturned all their tables, spilled all the money on the floor. Yeah, what'd you say, Joshua?
I was just thinking about it now. I love quoting that scripture, by the way. But it just occurred to me now, like with the rest of the Bible, we don't even know exactly what happened. You know, it could be made up. It could have been almost exactly like that, but with like a subtle difference, you know.
Yeah, who knows?
I saw the movie.
It's got to be true then. Okay.
Cecil B. DeMille knows all.
Yeah, I found many times I've drawn a very strong antagonism when I've just been as nice as I can be. And same with old Curtis over there. I was seeing him be pretty nice, and still people just irritated as a dickens once he. Yeah, I saw him one time. He had this guy cornered, and he says, "Now, would you just answer this question? Please say yes. A simple yes or no will suffice." And then Curtis asking him the question. That made several people mad when Curtis took that approach.
They hated that. Yes or no? Do you want to follow the word of God as it's written, or do you want to follow that leader over there? Yes or no?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, but that shouldn't be that antagonistic. But when people are cornered to where they have to face light or darkness and acknowledge that they're in the dark, it just really annoys them to no end.
One thing I like to say is I can't understand why you're not more appreciative when I prove to you how wrong you've been.
Yeah, the funny thing about us humans is we do not like to be wrong. And if we are wrong, we want to find find out about it in our quiet moments where we face it ourselves without anybody else around, and then maybe we can come to terms with it. But if somebody else is saying, you're wrong, ha ha ha, I'm right and you're stupid, well, then that just makes you not want to admit you're wrong, even if you know it. You know, so
many people want to hide their own guilt, and they feel very angry when you uncover something that they know is wrong.
yeah. So yeah, I've when people accuse me of not acknowledging that I'm wrong because they think they're right, and I say, well, I actually appreciate being wrong, because if I'm wrong, it means I've discovered something that's true, that's going to take me to a higher level. So I'm happy about that. They don't believe that at all, because they think that they are right and I'm just resisting.
They think that's a false arrogance.
Yeah, there's some people that tell you stuff that's entirely untrue, and because you don't accept it, they think you're just being stubborn. But it's not being stubborn if the person can't even make his case and he's saying something that's false. Yeah, it would be wrong to say you're accepting it just to cause for the sake of peace and not disturbing the guy. Okay, any more comment on that before we move on?
I used to be conceited, but now I'm perfect.
Well, that's good, Ed. We're glad to hear that.
Well, hey, once I thought I was wrong, but I was wrong.
Yeah. Who knows?
Just joking, Lord. I'm wrong lots of times. I don't mind seeing the truth when I've seen the error of my ways.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, though, it's good if you're going to have a debate to have it in public, so you can really show the people the light of day. You're not just trying to disprove a concept to an individual, but let people see the conflict or the contrast in your thinking, between your thinking and his thinking, and then they can make a more intelligent discernment.
Reminds me of an argument I was having with a kid back in high school. It's over a geometry question of some kind. It was a puzzle of some time we were trying to solve, and my friend thought, I can't remember the details, but my friend thought one thing was right and I thought another thing was right. And we were arguing about this for hours, just back and forth. And it got pretty heated. And then as I looked at the problem, I looked at it again, and I saw it in a totally different light, and I saw I was totally wrong and he was totally right. And all of a sudden I says, you know what? You're right. He says, what? I says, you're right, and I'm wrong. And he says, what? He says, say that again. I says, you're right, and I'm wrong. You're totally right. He said, wow, really? I mean, he was just so amazed. Never heard anybody admit they were wrong before like that. You know,
took the heat out of the moment.
And he never expected me to admit I was wrong. But, all of a sudden I saw he was right. So I just, you look like you're right after all. I was looking at a totally different angle. And I think that's the way I would react if I was having an argument. All of a sudden, it's so rare that somebody would just switch right in the middle of an argument, say, hey, all of a sudden I see that you were right. It just doesn't happen that often, and it would about cause a heart attack on a lot of people if you do that, probably. Okay.
Well, it happens to Christians when they begin to believe in reincarnation.
Yeah.
You have to see that half of their belief system was erroneous.
They have to refigure everything they've ever believed. KDK says the rightness of the truth enunciates a hatred and a fury which causes the person so much trouble, and for which he was not personally responsible. This antagonism comes from the reactionaries and the devotees of the race, and it should be remembered that it is largely impersonal, even though focused on him as a representative of the idea. So this is talking about the more advanced disciple when he enunciates a truth that it's really not his fault if he's enunciating it accurately, as harmlessly as possible, but he creates an antagonism that comes from reactionaries and devotees. And yeah, this attitude of devotion is associated strongly with the Piscean age, and it was good in the age of Jesus, but now it's time for its passing, and the idea of being devoted to an idea is changing to understanding the idea and being devoted to the truth wherever the truth may lie. But the hatred drawn by those who are not high initiates, he says, often comes from flaws within themselves. So there's two different sources there. Now, there are three lessons which every aspirant needs to learn. First, he says, most thought forms are built under the impulse of some emotion or some desire, very few by the intuition. So the aspirant must learn that fact, that emotion creates thought forms. Right now, to make say, if you're going to have a successful business idea or something like that, or an idea that's going to reach the masses, it has to be energized by a lot of emotional energy. If it is, then it has a lot more chance of being successful. He says, we need to learn about selfish thought forms. If they remain in the aura of the person, it causes him to be obsessed with his own ideas. If they are picked by others, then you have a stronger mind controlling the weaker and have the seeds of sectarianism and fanaticism. Okay, so a lot of creators create these selfish thought forms, and they are projected in his own aura. And then other people in his aura pick these up. They become devoted to him, and they become fanatics. And like cults, like Jim Jones, for instance, his ideas were caught in his own thought form. His followers picked it up. They go build a community in South America, and then he gets frustrated and has some drink that poison Kool-Aid, which they willingly drank and to their death. And same thing with that guy that Hale-Bopp comet tells everybody that this comet's going to come to the Earth, pick them up, and they're taken to the fourth dimension, and they were waiting, and it never showed up. And it happens all the time. He says the third thing we must learn is creators high and low of thought forms are responsible for them. Both the Jesus and the Buddha still have work to do with the effects that they initiated. Okay. And he points out that the creators of the thought form are responsible for it, and it has a life and a death. And he says that Christianity, for instance, Jesus gave birth to it. And because of this, he's responsible. And so he has to actually come back again and destroy the aspects of it that need to be destroyed. Because a thought form has a function, it's there, it does a good job, it does what it's supposed to do, and then it needs to be replaced by something higher. And so the basic principle of Christianity will not be destroyed, but a lot of the wrong turns the thought form has made will have to be corrected. And it'll be corrected to the point that eventually we'll have humanity will shift to a spiritual recognition that will be beyond Buddhism, Christianity, Taoism, or Hinduism, or any of the religions. Eventually, we will move out of the thought forms of the various religion to just what people will recognize as a true spiritual reality.
So what you're saying is, after he died, even though his thought form was perfect in a way. When he left, it was distorted by those who replaced him and took Christianity to a new low. So he might have to come back as like a pope or a religious leader and set it in order somehow.
Right. He'll have to come back as some type of leader and set it in order and destroy the negative aspects of it. Because each thought form has negative aspects that develop. And also, even the positive ones, some of the positive ones are not, they were useful in the past, but not really useful now.
They serve their purpose.
Right. And other positive ones are kind of eternal principles that will always apply, like loving your neighbor as yourself type of thing. That will always apply. But say maybe something like paying tithing or something like that may be changed to some other form of giving. So there's in each age, there's certain things that will work for one age that will not work for another age. There always has to be change. And so Jesus, he says, Jesus and Buddha are still linked, and they have work to do on some level to guide their thought forms to a harmless end and be replaced by something higher eventually. Okay. It says, in the beginning, the creator, one of the problems with thought forms, he says, the creator seeks to hold on and use it beyond its time. Now, somebody like a master may not do that, but rank and file creators and seekers and aspirants and many initiates, when they will create a thought form or create a project, and then when it fulfills its usefulness, they'll want to hold on to it. This is partially amplified by aging, in the fact that when we age, we want to the tendency is to hold on more than to build anew. And we want to hold on to our home or retirement or whatever, medical things. We want to hold on to what we have. And so this is the same with creators of thought forms, is when the thought form ages, the creator of the thought form tends to want to keep the thought form going, even though it's served its purpose. He says this is one of the problems with it.
And a good example of that is the war of the currents between Edison and Tesla.
Yeah.
Edison was so attached to his idea about direct current that he couldn't see the value of Tesla's alternating current. If it hadn't been for Tesla, we would have had no new age as we know it. We would have had no technology as we know it.
That's a really good. Yeah, that's a really good example.
Power from like half a mile away.
Yeah, Curtis, that's a really good example. Yeah, Edison was really attached to the direct current, even when it was proven that the alternating current was far superior. He held on to that idea because it was his idea, and if Tesla was right, it would mean he wouldn't get nearly the credit that he thought he deserved. So, right. So even a great man like Edison had a big problem with that, and this is a problem that many fairly high initiates have. He says
sometimes an ego gets in the way and hides the truth.
Yeah, and sometimes you see people you think are pretty highly evolved, and then something happens, you see, well, the guy's got pretty powerful ego after all. You know, it's you wonder how many people have really escaped the power of the ego. He says he talks about picking up thoughts and ideas. That there's a lot of thoughts and ideas that's in the air. We have a spiritual internet that's a higher correspondent to our internet that we're on right now. And in these, there's currents of thoughts that can be picked up. And many aspirants are very guarded about protecting their own thought forms, which could be picked up by others. The higher the thought, the fewer there are that can be picked up. So many people, when they get an idea, they think it's such a good idea that they're very guarded about it. But he says if it's on an astral level, you're not going to have a lot of luck in protecting it, because if it's clothed with astral matter, that a lot of people are going to pick it up. But if you raise above the astral level, then the thought form is very difficult for the rank and file to pick up. And I've often thought about the molecular relationship. Haven't seen any. I've been teaching about it for many years, but haven't seen anybody pick it up and try to duplicate it. And I think that's because it's on a very high mental level. It doesn't really appeal a lot to the emotions. Outside of every once in a while, somebody thinks that, hey man, it would be really great if I can walk through walls or something. And they get excited about that, which is kind of astral approach to it. But outside of that, it's not picked up by many on the astral level. He says, if thought forms of the Creator can be shared, they can be communicated on the desire level and picked up by students who will clothe it with the same desire. If they are on a higher order, the Creator will not add desire, and only those on the mental level will pick them up to the safety of the Creator. If they must be protected, He will create them in high mental matter. So there are certain things that you might want to keep secret. He says, if you do, create them free from desire. And then you can teach them to other people on a spiritual level, and they will not be stolen and distorted. Okay, this is what the masters do. They teach on a very high level, so their ideas will not be distorted. On the other hand, when they reach down to the common man, they have to clothe them with astral matter, and this is where the danger occurs. Then people pick them up and they distort them and change them, alter them to fit their desires, and they are no longer representative of the true principles that were part of the origination. He says,
we have to be careful of the sea of mental garbage that surround this planet. People think we have thoughts, and sometimes their thoughts have us.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, the sea of all kinds of thoughts out there, and he talks about protecting your thoughts. And there are ways to protect your thoughts, and one of the main ways is to divorce your thoughts from your desires. Become when you take the attitude of the servant for servant's sake, divorcing yourself from selfish interest. He says, then you will be able to protect your thoughts. So people will not be able to read your minds. The only ones that will be able to read your minds will be somebody like a master. But the rank and file will not be able to access your thoughts, your ideas, your plans. Whereas when the person clothes his thought forms with desire energy, then he can be picked up. His thoughts and intent and ideas can be picked up much more easily. Okay, we're reaching the end of the hour. Any comments?
Another thing about thought forms is they are somewhat self-sustaining and strengthening, and it's very easy to get way too many. They stick around in your upper aura.
Yeah.
And you get enough of them up there, it's like having a cluttered desk or something. It really becomes a self-imposed prison if you've got too many active thought forms blocking your vision.
Yeah, you want to avoid the shotgun effect too. If you got too many thought forms in there, it dissipates your power. You should have one major thought form at a time you're trying to energize, and this will give you a lot more power, especially if you can rise above the plane of the emotions. This will give you power to attract people of a high vibration. It doesn't do you any good to contact thousands or even millions of people with low vibration if your creation winds up doing more harm than good. We want the creation to manifest in a way that will be of service to humanity. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, we will see you next week. I had a 3 today because we had a family reunion and had a few delays. Do you guys like, would you rather like do it at 2 o'clock every Sunday, or does some of you like the morning best?
I think it's good to rotate. Like they've been doing 10 and 2. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we'll plan on 10 o'clock in the morning next Sunday, all being well, unless you hear otherwise.
That's perfect.
Okay,
Yay.
we will see you then.
Go forth and change the world.
Thank you, guys.
You betcha.